What's going on, everybody? It's Rock here, and I'm back at you with another video for Ming Tech Media. And in today's video, we're going to discuss the class basics in Java. Now, for this video, I'm going to do a sort of breadth first approach in which I will be discussing a lot of topics. I won't go too deep into any topic. I just want to give you sort of a brief overview of classes in Java so you can get up and running with them and know how to work with them. And in later videos, I'll go into more depth about a lot of the topics I will bring up and discuss here. So yeah, let's talk about classes first. What is a class? So in Java, like C Sharp and like C++ and Python and many other object-oriented programming languages, classes are the essential part of object-oriented programming. And a class is basically just a blueprint for how to do things. And they're a blueprint for, more specifically, how to create objects. And objects are instances of classes. So the way to think of an object is to think of a house, right? A blueprint is just a template for a house. A house is the instance of that blueprint. It's the creation of that blueprint, the manifestation of that blueprint, right? So if you think of like of an apartment block, or like sort of apartment complex with many units, a lot of those units are more or less the same, and they're polymorphic in that they have different addresses or maybe like a different sort of like living room design, but they're probably like more or less the same in that unit or in that complex, right? And that goes back to a concept in object-oriented programming, which I will not discuss too much, but it's called polymorphism. I'll discuss the four pillars of object-oriented programming in a later video, but that's what classes are, right? And I want to also start by discussing some of the key things that you'll see in classes, which are the access modifier or the visibility and access modifiers, right? So Java provides four of these access modifiers, which are public, protected, private, and default. And really, you'll only see private and public most times. You might see protected sometimes, but not really. And you'll hardly ever see default. So let's talk about them really quick. Default, that's basically the absence of any access modifier. So we can see in this student class here, if I were to take away this public here, that'd be perfectly legal. Or maybe one of these here, this private here, that'd be perfectly legal. Or from this get name method, this is a method here, take that away, that would mean that it is default. And what default means is that it's accessible only within that same package. So this package here, we have this thing called packages in Java, and packages are basically groups of similar classes. So for this application, this mock application I'm using to sort of make an example or make examples for you of how classes work, I'm mocking an application I used to use in college called Blackboard, which is basically an online web app that allows you to sort of do homework and submit homework assignments, read, discussion threads from, your professor, read comments from professors on your homework, allows you to see your grades, calculates your grades, and shows you your grades. It's like a dashboard with like all the things that you would do in like a college sort of setting, right? And I grouped a lot of these similar classes together, like a student, a professor, a grade, a grade calculator, a class, and then there's a main class here, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But packages are just groups of classes with related, are just groups of related classes together in an application, right? So the default keyword only allows you to access, that either property, that class, or that method within the same package, right? So let's move on to the public modifier. Let me just control Z that or command Z. I'm on my Mac right now. So public, what does that mean? Public allows the access of a class, a method, or a variable to be accessed from anywhere from within the same package or outside that package. So you notice I have two packages here. I don't have any classes here in this dashboard package, but let's just hypothetically say we did have classes there. Um, because these are public, like this class student or this this get name, this was what's called a method, I would be able to access that from a class within the dashboard package. Now, I've been talking a lot about properties and methods, and I should have discussed that first, but properties are, or variables are the state in your application, right? And these methods are the behavior, right? And the variables are usually some type of noun, like a name, an ID, a major, right? And these methods, they're defined by some curly braces, right? These curly braces that you see here, like that, they define the scope of a method. And between these curly braces, you would have some sort of behavior. So methods are your behavior in the application, and they work on the state. As you can see, it's returning. This is a special keyword that allows you to return, this state, this ID right here, or whatever you want to return, right? And as for methods, they have like, an access modifier, and they also have a return type. So for this type, and we'll discuss types later in Java, you have the int type, and this method has to return that type. It can't return like a string or, a date or something else. So yeah, that's a little bit about methods. Um, and state and behavior. So let's go back to the access modifiers, because we have a couple I haven't talked about yet. So we have private as well. Private is basically when you can only access a state or a method within that same class. So because these names, this name, this ID, and this major is labeled as private, it's only accessible in the student class. And that goes back to a concept in object-oriented programming called encapsulation. It's one of the four pillars of object-oriented programming. The other three being abstraction, inheritance, and polymorphism. So encapsulation basically just says that each object maintains like a private access to its state inside the class, right? So the state can't be directly changed by other methods or functions outside that class. And the object manages its own state via the functions, like these functions here, right? So once you create these variables here, the functions change them. You can't go back later and change them, from outside another class, or, some other, package or something. You can only do that with these methods here, like this get ID, get major, set major, that kind of thing. These methods work on the state, right? And then you have protected. Protected, when you annotate something like a member variable or a method with protected, basically that allows you to access, within that allows access to that variable or that method within the same class, or within the same package, or from a subclass. So basically a subclass is subtype. So like in the student example, right? I could have another type of student called a med student, which would extend, and you'd put so it would be like, let's just say we still had this, student class somewhere else, and I had like med students, right? And that would extend using the special keyword extends, that extends student, right? So basically this med student would inherit all of these properties and methods, and then you can add some other properties in med student, like, I don't know, like med school, or med grade, or something like that, that's related to, that specific type of student, right? So let me just delete that, go back to student. So yeah, so those are the access modifiers. So let's talk about like naming conventions and comments and a bunch of other things. So as far as naming conventions go, you could name a class with like a lowercase, like student, and that would be perfectly valid. It's only giving me problems because I'm using student in other places, but if I were to change these to lowercase, it would be perfectly valid. But you're not going to see that out in a while, whether it be a job, an open source project, or whatever, where you're reading Java code. All the classes are going to be capitalized from the first letter. And for every word in that class, like you see this class local date up here, And I'll talk about this import statement in a second. But you see local date, if I go into that, I can press Command or Control on a Windows, and you click into that. You see every first letter of every word is capitalized, and that's a convention in Java, right? As a convention that you should follow. The first letter of a property or a method is lowercase, right? And it follows like this camel case convention where the first word gets a lowercase first letter, then every word after that starts with a capital letter. So if this was like get full name, that first F, that F in that first letter, full will be capitalized, name, the N will be capitalized, and so on and so forth. That's for properties and methods as well, right? So for the variables and the methods. And then we have this concept of comments. So comments are, they're not interpreted or, they're not executed by the JVM or anything like that. That's more so for developers to read or other developers to read your code and understand what you were doing, what the context is. And usually you group similar code blocks together and you annotate them with a comment if necessary or if need be. So these two forward slashes, everything after the two forward slash on this line 13 would be a part of this comment. If you wanted multi-line comments, you could do that by having a forward slash, two asterisks, and another forward slash. And then when you press enter between them, and you can write whatever you want here. Like here is a comment. Here is multi-line comment. And you'll see that when there needs to be a little bit more context, maybe you need one or two or three lines to kind of explain something and document some sort of, thing that needs some sort of explaining in code. You'll see that sometimes. So that's multi-line comments, single line comments, naming conventions. Oh yeah, let me discuss this import keyword. So the import keyword is important because it allows you to import classes from anywhere, whether it be from another package that you've created or from the Java language itself, the internal classes that it includes. These are all Java packages, right? So they all come from util. Well, this one comes from time. And as I went into one the other second ago, you can go into these and you can see they pretty much explain all the methods and properties in these classes. So let me just exit out of this. So yeah, you can see scanner as well. This is another Java class that allows you to do the act on input from a keyboard. And so let me just close out of that. So yeah, that's basically it for comments. Now let's go to the main class, right? You have your main class, and there's always going to be a sort of, you can call this like application or whatever. It doesn't have to be main, but there's a main method in this class, right? And you'll always see it sort of named, it's named this way, right? Public, static, void, main, right? String args, right? And this is the main entry point in a Java program, in any Java program. And it is absolutely mandatory that it must be included in Java, in a Java program that needs to be executed, right? So when the program is executed, the JVM that looks for this method and it executes it first. So let's break down each part of this method, each part of it, all of these keywords, right? What they're doing and how they work, right? So we have public here, right? Public is a keyword. That's the access modifier that we talked about a little bit ago, which allows the main method to be accessed by any other class in that same package. So that's why it has to be public. So this static keyword here, the second keyword, that's static. That keyword makes the main method a static method, which means that it can be called without any instance of a class. So you don't have to create an instance of the main class. You can just call, because like, with classes, you can't call a method from, like, I can't like use this method here in student. I can't call it right now and just use it, right? Uh, I only can do that with like static methods like this one, where it allows you when you make a this keyword makes the main method static. That basically means it can be called without an instance of a class. So in other words, you don't need to create an object of that class to use it in the main method, or use the main method in general, right? So void. Void is this next word here, and that's just has to do with return types. So that keyword indicates that the main method doesn't return any value. And when you see methods annotated with this void type, or just preceded with this keyword void, that means that there's no type returning, or there's no type being returned, and it's probably just doing some work and then just spitting that work out or something, right? So main is the name of the method, and it is a keyword in Java. So this is a keyword, but it's also a keyword in Java, and that string args, right? This string args, basically, this is a parameter of the main method, which is an array of strings. The args parameter, that's used to pass the command line arguments to the program. So when a Java program is executed, the JVM then looks for the main method, right, to start the execution of the program. And then the main method, that entry point, this entry point here of the program, um, that's always executed first. And the args parameter is an array of strings that is used to pass these command line arguments, right, to the program. And these arguments are passed to the main method when a program is executed. But let's also just jump into this main method and talk about it for a little bit, right? Um, so right here, I'm taking this student class and I'm creating a new student. So I'm so I have the name, right? So I have to precede it with a type, right? And then on the other side of the equal, I have the new keyword, which creates that student. And because of the constructor, yes, the constructor is basically a method in your Java program that sets up your object. So when you're creating an object, you pass the constructor whatever you specified here, which is usually your properties. You pass it, and then it creates a new object from those properties. So yeah, sorry I didn't explain that earlier, but yeah, from that constructor or from this new, it creates that object, and you pass it your you know whatever you specified within that constructor. So here it's just a name, an ID, and a major. So I've created 4 students, right? And then I've created a list of students. This array list is another type, is another class, which basically allows you to create a dynamically growing or shrinking list. Because in Java, when you create arrays, you have to specify the length prior to creating it, and they're not really dynamic like in other languages. So we circumvent that by using this array list type that allows you to dynamically add and grow it. So I'm adding students to this student list. And this, angle break brackets just specifies to the array list class what type am I including in this array list, right? So I'm adding a bunch of students called in this, array list called student list. All right, so if I wanted to add the student here, that'll be perfectly legal as well, but it's not, you don't really, it's not mandatory. You can just declare an array list like that. So here I'm using a method that's included on the array list type called add, and I'm adding these students that I created, George, Emily, Alumide, and Karthik. I'm adding them all to this student list, right? So after that, I have the professor type as well, where, I create a type of professor and give it a name. So yeah, what I've got here is I created a bunch of students, added them to a list of students, the student list here. And then I created a professor, gave him a name, Professor Ogilvy, gave him a department, geography department, and you see IntelliJ gives you these little hints here. And then I created a class, new class, Geography 101, passed it this Professor Ogilvy, Mr. Ogilvy. And then I passed it a student list, because if you go into class, the class for class, I should have named this a better name, but whatever, this is an example. But give your class names more descriptive names. So yeah, in the constructor, which is that method that sets up your object, right? I have a name, a professor, and a student, list of students. And I pass that and I get set. I use a this keyword to set all those to these properties, private properties. I use that to set that in this constructor here. So in the main class, I have to pass it a name. I gave it Geography 101, which is a string. I gave it the professor, Professor Ogilvy, and a student list, right? So here in the, I have a special method, which is a system method where I'm printing out what's in between these parentheses. So I have a string, the class, and I'm concatenating with this plus symbol here. I'm getting the class name here, the get name, and then I'm concatenating another string. So it's going to be this, the class Geography 101. It's going to be printed here for that get name. It's taught by Geography get professor. So you can have on that class method, on that class, you have a get professor where it returns the name of your professor. And so I guess the professor and has the following students. So basically, I have a toString method here on this class where I use this string builder. Again, you don't have to know too much about this. Just, bear with me here. I am just getting the list of students and I'm looping through them with an enhanced for loop, and then I'm printing them out and I'm appending them to the string builder and I'm returning it back to a string. I'm turning it back into a string. So that's all I'm really doing. Not doing anything much here. But yeah, you don't have to know that much about that. Just know that I'm getting the list of students and I'm putting it into a readable string, right? So when I run this, and you can run anything in IntelliJ and a lot of IDEs with this triangle green button. You have the play here, and it's here too. So I'm going to press it up here. You run main, and it should output the class Geography 101 is taught by, is running, and then you'll see it building here on the bottom and the progress of it on the bottom here on the bottom right. And it should output that for me. So yeah, you see here, it says the class Geography. All right, let me just give that a little space and then let's rerun that again. You have to, give your strings like little spaces in between. So, because computers are dumb and they do everything literally. So you have to be very detailed. So here you got to make sure you have all your spacings in between these concatenations, or also print with everything jumbled together, because concatenation is literally just slapping two things together, right? All right. So you see here, it says the class Geography 101 is taught by Professor Ogilvy, and the students and it has the following students: George, Emily, Olumide, and Karthik, which are all the students, George, Emily, Olumide, and Karthik, which I added to this student list here, which I'm going down in this print line method, and I'm passing that here. So I'm able to use the get students and get it, basically, because on the class, to instantiate a class, you need a string name for the class, the type professor, and a list of students. So I passed the, class a list of students, and I'm getting it here because there's a method called get students, and there's also a toString. So I'm combining those two methods, the toString and the get students, to return that. Because if I just got the students, it would just return the students and their object reference to the place in memory. Maybe I should show you that. So let me just toString. Let me just take the toString off and just do the Geography get student so you can see what I'm talking about. Take that extra line off, or that extra parentheses off. And then when I run it, you'll see that I'll, instead of getting that readable George, Emily, Lumine, and Karthik, I'm getting like the references, which is like the memory address, and it doesn't look very readable or legible or whatever. So yeah, you see that I'm getting student 6737 blah blah blah. I'm getting like these addresses, these student objects in memory versus the actual string representation, which is I was able to get by using the toString method on the get students. So yeah, let me run that again so you can see it clean. Yeah, and there it is. The class Geography 101 is taught by Professor Ogilvy and has the following students: George, Emily, Lumide, and Karthik. Alrighty, guys, that is it for my tutorial on classes. I hope I was able to teach you a lot about classes or enough about classes just to get started. And I will go into more detail in subsequent lectures and subsequent videos on a lot of these things. I just wanted to give you a brief overview of what classes are, how they work, some key things to know about them, some conventions, and all this other stuff, so that you can have a general understanding of how classes work in Java. But without further ado, I want to end this lesson. And if you find value in this video or other videos on my channel, I encourage you to like, comment, and subscribe. It keeps me going and keeps me creating more content like this. So thank you, and you have a good day. Thanks for watching.